You are a young student at the University of Chile. You voted for Salvador Allende in the 1970 election in hopes that poverty will be alleviated and the interests of the few will no longer hold supreme. One day, on September 11th, 1973, you are woken up by a bomb, maybe a mile away from your home. You have no idea what is going on, but you know it is not something good. Soon after, you are told that the military bombed the presidential palace and that Salvador Allende died while fighting troops. The same day, your older brother, of whom was involved in charity to the poor and spoke out against more conservative aspects of your government, went missing. You fear for his safety, but remain optimistic that he will return. Soon after, the troops kick down your door and beat you senseless. They take you to the same stadium and torture you for information. Dissatisfied or not with your response, they murder you with a bullet to the head. To share with you the terrifying tale of the Chilean Coup of 1973, it would be an injustice to not share with you as to who Salvador Allende was, as well as his tragic suicide. This tragic death led to an illegal regime led by Augusto Pinochet that committed crimes against humanity. And shockingly to some, the United States had a hand to play in such events. Salvador Allende was a champion of the poor. What he wanted was for the interests of all of people of Chile to be held over the interests of the few and powerful. As consequence, the rich were appalled by such a man and his promises. The political intention was boiling to the way of violence. Then on September 11th, 1973, a coup led by then Commander-in-Chief Augusto Pinochet bombed the presidential palace, and after a brief battle, Allende committed suicide. Such horrible events shook the Chilean people down to their knees. However, the fears they held for their future came to fruition soon after. These events manifested into something known famously as the Caravan of Death, a military death squad sent out by the new Pinochet regime. The intent was to instill fear amongst any progressive-minded people. You did not even have to be a communist to get the wall. All that was needed was to dislike Pinochet. The Caravan of Death is responsible for the torture, kidnapping, and execution of thousands, as reported by the Chilean government. My great-aunt, my grandmother's sister, was a member of the Communist Party in Chile before, during, and after the 1973 coup. Her daughter, who was 12 at the time, gave me the honor of sharing some of her mother's stories with me. Keep in mind that the military only targeted working-class neighborhoods, and in turn let the rich neighborhoods go on peacefully. A clear sign displaying as to what exactly was going on. She was in her home listening to the farewell speech given by Allende during his last hours of life. My tia, worried for her future, cried during the speech. As well as being terrified for her future, she was also terrified for her children. She made sure to hide any leftist literature, propaganda, anything that would give the soldiers a reason to kill her and make her children orphans. The retelling continues as so. She, on the same night, went to the capital district to protest, as they were accustomed to. Her daughter remembers my tia coming back beaten to a pulp. Luckily, she was not killed. However, others were not lucky. As my tia recalls, the soldiers were executing people and throwing their bodies into the Mapocho River, the main river running through Santiago. The same night, the soldiers in their tanks would come through the pueblos, the working-class districts, and raid homes. My tia's home was one of the homes raided due to her right-wing neighbors informing the soldiers of her leftist beliefs. As she had the hindsight to hide anything that could be related to leftist thought, she got out with her life time and time again. Though others were not so lucky, as the same night she heard gunshots and screaming. The crime? Either being anti-Pinochet or for simply being out past curfew. To continue, my tia, in bravery, went to the same stadium others were being held in to free a friend from his fate. She got him out and sent him up north to hide in some churches that were friendly with the movement. This led to the Pinochet regime hunting and killing priests. And not only did the Caravan of Death create scars for the Chilean people, but so did the economic policies implemented by Pinochet. Following the philosophy of the Chicago Boys, a group think tank compromised of capitalists with a fetish for privatization, Pinochet essentially made every major industry he could private, save for the copper industry. These include water, food, infrastructure, banks, and even social security. As a consequence, the GDP in Chile was raised throughout Pinochet's regime. However, it is a common misconception that a high GDP means a more prosperous country for its people. In truth, income inequality skyrocketed while social mobility dropped. An example is how private health insurance companies had two different forms of services, one for the rich and one for the poor. Chile under Pinochet is praised by conservatives all around the world, especially from the United States, a country of whom is claimed as a champion of freedom and democracy. They had a part to play in Pinochet's illegal toppling of a democratically elected president. In 1998, the NSA released declassified documents that related the United States and their involvement in the coup. In them, they assert that although the United States did not provide military aid to Pinochet, they most certainly paved his way to power. Through Secretary of State Henry Kissinger and the Nixon administration, in the files, the NSA states that the Nixon administration put forth invisible sanctions against Allende's Chile through the World Bank and other multinational corporations. This led to economic harshness that made many blame the Chilean government for such hard times. On top of this, the United States, through the CIA, issued anti-communist propaganda with the goal of creating political tension to pave the way for a coup. These attempts at propaganda are so powerful that my Chilean grandmother remains a supporter of Pinochet despite having an ex-boyfriend thrown off a helicopter by the caravan of death. After the atrocities were carried out and Pinochet was in power, Nixon gave praise to Chile under Pinochet, thus legitimizing him. With knowledge of Allende, who he was, and the coup that ended his life, I find myself heartbroken, even more so when I learned firsthand stories of the caravan of death and the terrors that followed. I struggle to be patriotic for a country such as the United States that has a hand to play in such terrible events. And I reassert that the coup led to a terrifying fascistic regime of whom left scars in Chile today. With many industries operating as private entities, my people are still suffering, and my family included. Today in Chile, there are constant protests nationwide against a neoliberal government that still has a fetishization for privatization. Still, the government is only just redoing their constitution, implemented under the Pinochet regime, and this was only through means of violent protests against the state and its police. The movement is still going strong, with millions of coming out every time an injustice is committed. I am hopeful for the Chilean people and their future.